share this presentation. Some requests, some will take it. Thank you.
अभी डिस्टर्ब नहीं करना.
हाँ.
Very good. First request, please participate. I am a student of change management. I have been a student for 3.5 decades. Probably ever since the term was coined in the context of human resource. But yes, change management always used to be technology. Right? Whenever you have a change request, how do you manage that change request, etc. Change management was coined in the context of people. First time around the mid-90s. There have been students in there. There is really nothing rocket science in this. I'm sure you will all be able to connect and relate to many of these things that I'm going to speak about. What this provides is a kind of a framework and a structure in which you can put your hooks in, and hopefully that will help you remember that. So that's the first request. Please participate. Please, let's learn together. Second, this is not a master plan or a playbook or a methodology or an approach to manage change. These are bits and pieces of critical elements that need to be managed during any change process. So whether it be people, whether it be resistance, whether it be culture issues, etc., which is what is on the agenda, all of those play a role as to how successful your change efforts are going to be. And we will speak about some of those as we go along. Key point, a lot of it is based on my learnings, the lessons I've had, experiences, and my biases and personal life beliefs, philosophies, and so on. So please contest, because that's how we will all learn. I may use, as we go along, lots of always, never, etc., etc., the extreme words. I've also learned that, unfortunately, life is hardly ever at the extremes. Most of it is in the middle. The normal curve is followed perfectly well by life. So most of those always, never, etc., please read them as saying, in many cases it will be in the middle, some cases may be at the extremes. Okay? This is what we had defined last time. Okay. I don't know how many of you were present in last year's session, which was focused on personal change. Today we are shifting the focus to organizational change. They are very interrelated. End of the day, an organization is about people getting together. So a lot of what we did then is still going to be applicable. There will be overlaps, and as we go along, I will speak about those. So,
Please, sir, can I
sure.
just make an observation? Would it be right in the current context, because as we are sitting for the real time, the latest news that has happened is the change which is happening in the Tatas. Your sentence is very strong. So would that be indicative of that, right? That stress which is happening.
So the reason why it is stress induced is, if there is no stress that a change produces or triggers, there's no point trying to manage it, right? We are not stressed out, we are not unhappy, it is okay, we are accepting. So the reason why this is worded the way it is, the original definition was just disruption in expectations. That's how Dale Corner actually defined it. I have chosen to define it as saying it is stress inducing, because if it is not inducing stress, we shouldn't waste our time and energy trying to manage it. The whole reason is it is causing stress and therefore needs to be managed. The point is valid. Whatever is happening in Tatas is change, including what is happening in US with Trump, what is happening in between Iran and the US, what is happening between India and Pakistan. All those are issues of stress-inducing changes. Because we expect something that something is not happening. Something good may be happening, better than what you expect, or something bad may be happening. We'll look at some of those aspects.
Good definition.
The best way to understand this is to rewind back into your own lives and look at all those instances where you had some stress or the other. And if you analyze those situations well, you will find that you had some expectation and reality turned out to be different. And that is what causes stress. And that is the stress, and you look at how stress and change are connected, and that is the stress that we are trying to manage, and therefore, or thereby managing change. Some examples, I don't think we'll spend time on this. We have enough and more examples in our own lives across the domains, the technology, people, environment, etc. Just a moment. Sorry. We had spoken about 4 axioms, which we need to keep in mind when we are dealing with change. I'm repeating those 4 axioms from last time. The first is perception is reality. Or more specifically, my perception is my reality. And we will have as many or more perceptions here, and therefore we have as many or more realities. And we will look at how this influences individuals, because information is the same. My perception of a piece of information is different from your perception, etc. And therefore, our reaction to that information is going to be different. And hence, when we are managing change at organizational levels, if we are not conscious of the fact that there may be 1,000 different realities operating in a 1,000-member organization, we will fail somewhere. Of course, we will make a choice. We will not deal with 1,000 realities, but will we deal with 1 or 10 or 100 is a choice that we will accept. Sorry. Second axiom, everything is relative. If I hold a 100-rupee note for you, it will mean something for you. For the beggar on the street, it will mean a lot. For the Adanis and Ambanis of the world, it may not mean anything. Okay? Very trivial example, but this is true of everything that we deal with. Pain, happiness, relationships, anything that you speak about is relative to, and we were just discussing 10 minutes ago, and we were talking about beauty is in the eyes of the beholder. Not just beauty, everything is in the eyes of the beholder, and that is what causes the relativity. Humans are control-oriented animals. This is one of the key factors why change causes stress and why we need to manage. Because we are control-oriented animals, and neuroscience says that the brain dislikes any change away from stress. So we are designed, whatever worked in the past, we will continue to work with that. But the problem is, almost nothing is in our control. This humans are control oriented has been in place from the time human civilizations started. You look at anything that we did, it was all oriented towards control. Control of 2 types. If it can be legislated, dictated, etc., great. That's the best, the ideal. But control not necessarily that way. Control also in terms of our facility to predict what is going to happen. If we can predict what is going to happen and that happens, we feel we are in control. So control has 2 dimensions. One, the ability to legislate and the ability to predict. And this control talks about both. We would prefer to be able to legislate, but if we can't legislate, at least can we predict what is going to happen so that we can build our expectations. And this also goes back to neuroscience. The last piece, and I referred to it in a couple of slides ago, stress causes change. If you want change to happen, and change can be initiated by us, it doesn't have to be thrust on us. So if you want to initiate change, you have to create stress. If you don't create stress, you will not get change. And Newton's law, if there is change, there will be stress. So if change gets thrust on us, it is going to create stress.
I think even the last slide, the last quadrant rather, is that, for example, the Ukraine example, the War between Ukraine and Russia and hitting the world. So there is stress, therefore change. In that other sense to it.
I would like to believe, and that's again my bias because I've been in this space for too many years. I would like to believe that stress to change as a vicious or a virtuous cycle is almost universal.
The stress on P&L will go to change.
If you have a stress on P&L, what will you do?
Wonderful
You will
definition.
either try to improve your revenue line or your cost line. So there's an immediate reaction. That will in turn result in so many other initiatives,
Exactly.
either on the revenue line or the profit line.
Would you say that stress here refers to an applied
Good
force?
definition. Stress.
Stress here could be a physics force, like me pushing the table, or it could be a psychological force. I'm
More
hungry
psychological.
is stress. I'm thirsty is stress. Or if there is an emotional pressure on me because of some relationship issues, some sentimental issues, etc., those are also stresses. So this is in two terms, physio-psychological stress.
So basically, anything out of my comfort is has a stress.
Exactly. So the moment I move away from comfort zone, which is status quo, I will find some stress somewhere. Routine, normal, day to day, we manage not to stress without even realizing that we are managing. But when it becomes too many in numbers or too much in intensity is when we actually show. And we will talk about some of the impact. How do we manifest stress? We will talk. Let's hold that thought. It's not so simple. You will resist no matter what. You may not realize it, but you will resist. Okay? And every change, again I'm using extreme words, every change is associated with resistance. Good change and bad.
Ignore this stress issues. Let's say people who are getting retired at the age of 60.
Right.
Some people may think, oh, should you have a guy who are retired?
Correct.
So there is a change
Yeah.
in his life.
Ah.
But he is happy, he is not stressed. One possibility. Second possibility, you know that you are getting retired at the age of 60. You are going to be changing life or lifestyle or whatever. So again, it may not reduce the stress.
So basically you're jumping forward.
Okay, sorry.
We will talk
Sorry.
about, good point. We will talk about concept of resilience. If you are highly resilient, change is not going to impact you. So you will absorb that stress. You will be functional in spite of that stress.
I am arguing it doesn't create stress first of all. Forget
You
about
don't-
managing
You
it.
don't perceive it as stress.
You have
Because
predicted already.
you are
already
resilient.
predicted.
You are resilient. You are expecting that to happen. You know that is going to happen. But imagine the situation of a person who say official retirement age is 65. At the age of 60, suddenly overnight he's told that company is revised retirement age 60. You don't have to come to office tomorrow. No matter how well he's prepared, do you think he will undergo stress? So it again goes back to expectation, it goes back to how well and how resilient you are and how much of comfort you've built into your own psyche to say that I can handle everything that comes.
Yeah, there is also a stress or something with a change. This year suddenly finance minister said the income tax limit is
12 lakhs.
0.75. That is a 75 come for additional.
Ah.
But the old thing is we used to think from 5 lakhs. So where to save the tax?
Correct.
So पूरा पट्टी हो जाएगा. So have to now have more money. So we just to spend it and to help the economy. But we still feel the thing how to navigate or migrate to that.
That's a different discussion because in spite of all of that, our savings rate has not improved. We will discuss that at some other point in time. Okay. We also spoke about change as a process. Change is a topic that we use very loosely, but we want to analyze it, understand it, work with it. You need to be very clear in what you're trying to define. So, in this definition, change is not the steady states between here and now. For example, Mr. Idea's example of retirement. It is not the pre-retirement time nor the post-retirement time. It is that short period of time where you are transitioning between being a working employee to being a post-retired happy-go-lucky boy. It may be few minutes, it may be a few years, but there is a process that you will undergo. And that is what change is all about. It is not the status of steady state before or the steady state after. It is that dip in between. And I spoke about the brain. Human beings, on an average, dislike uncertainty because the way the brain is structured. So, I would like you to take away this quote, if not reading it, saying that most humans prefer
Absolutely.
certainty of misery to the misery of uncertainty.
Ladies and gentlemen, one good humorous example to that would be Trump and his Nobel Peace Prize. The misery of
To whom? To whom? To Trump. Okay, good. Then we spoke about last time positive and negative change. Positive change is where we believe we have the capability to manage whatever is coming our way, and therefore we are going to be resilient. We are going to use our resilience resources and manage that change. Negative is when we are succumbing, we are falling under the pressure and we are not able to manage whatever the reality throws at us. We spoke about resilience, let me not spend time. Assimilation points is a hypothetical point, kind of a resource, again defined by Ramachandran, where he says that every time you deal with stress, you consume assimilation points. Imagine it like wealth. If you have lots of wealth, you can expend it in a variety of ways and not necessarily suffer. Similarly, if you have lots of assimilation points because of your nature, because of your experience, because of the various things that you do in life, even if you are hit with change and you have to manage that change and stress, you consume some points, but you have a big bank balance. Right? So, look at assimilation points as your storehouse of resilience, the currency of resilience, so to speak. What happens when you don't manage change, we don't use our assimilation points well, we don't manage stress well? I think I, in the passing, mentioned dysfunctional or functional behavior. These are the various types of dysfunctional behavior. And when our assimilation budget is done, we are going to be somewhere on the scale. And believe me, this is a scary scale. It starts at brief irritation at work. It could be a brief irritation for an instant, or it could be brief irritations throughout the day. So on to moderate dysfunction, which will include physical symptoms like headaches, pains. How many of you have had colleagues who, when they are stressed out, will not come to office and report saying, headache, stomach upset, etc. These are, including me,
Very common.
very common. So these are, while psychosomatic in nature, the underlying reason is stress. Interpersonal withdrawal, and can go on. It can go up to murder and suicide. My favorite example, and it's a crude example, meaning not something you would like to talk about. Every year, when results of schools, colleges, etc. are out, we hear about suicide. Have you ever gone behind those stories to see what were those suicidees, if those things can be a term of that kind, actually expected? Suicides are typically from people who expected to do well and did not. It is never from people who expected to do poorly and did poorly. Whether family pressure, their own expectations, whatever, they expected to do ABC, but they are somewhere right there. And they are the ones who actually either attempt or commit suicide. And you can take that example and run it past most experiences in life. You expect something there, you actually end up hitting that. And that is when all stress breaks in.
Actually, yesterday was the World Mental Health Day, and I was surprised with time. idea about that, but that gives us something which is very important.
Yes.
Mental age is very critical now.
Simply because, thanks to the information age, we are getting bombarded by
Yes.
complex, confusing
Yeah.
information
Right.
24/7.
Yeah.
Okay. And therefore it has become difficult for us to calibrate expectations.
Yeah, I think here you wanted to say something.
Yeah, so my point was higher the intellect, you find higher level of suicide. But
I don't know
the
whether-
tolerance level,
I don't know
wherever
whether
there
competent
is,
to.
for example, in Japan, the tolerance level of any deficiency is very less.
But that is not necessarily intelligent.
Yeah, that is because if you see
It
people
is a
who-
cultural issue of the people that their
Who are
expectations.
so disciplined, who are so
Exactly.
intelligent, some deviation and they go.
yeah, so they think that the world is not in his control.
The reason I said intelligence is because, again, going back to my neuroscience phase, there is no one dimension of intelligence. There are multiple dimensions. The intelligence we talk about is just a generic form of intelligence. There's spatial intelligence, there's numerical intelligence, there's emotional intelligence, there's social intelligence, and I'm sure there will be 101 other intelligences that I'm not aware of. So, difficult to therefore respond to that, whether there is a correlation or not.
Deviation of the norm is what he's talking about.
But, yeah, the problem there is maybe expectation. Because they are so disciplined, they expect everything to operate in a particular manner. And if it doesn't, it shakes them up. And people who are not resilient will get actually shaken up. Okay, so we spoke about magnitudes of change. Micro at the individual level, maybe individual, maybe family. Macro at the global level, and in between, which is organization. Organizations here contextually we're meaning businesses. Organizations could be societies, could be social groups, etc. The paradox here is macro change is happening all over the world. For example, AI, technology, etc. is hitting everyone. But to change, to be embedded and become successful, that change has to be driven pretty much further. And that's the paradox. Everyone is impacted by AI and agentic AI, etc. Are any of you personally affected by it? It's a concern. Kya hoga pata nahi, tomorrow something may happen, may not happen, etc. But we are not going to lose our sleep over it yet. Because it is a global change, but not yet a micro change. Neuroscience we spoke about briefly. The conscious brain is a high energy consuming organ. Okay. If you are resting, no other energy is being spent, even then the brain is at work. And there are various things that the brain is doing. So because it is high energy consuming, and because human beings evolution put high value to survival, the brain is constantly trying to focus on survival, which means maintain status quo. If you have reached here, that means you have survived till this point. Therefore, whatever we have done must have worked, so maintain status quo. That's the brain's logic. And for those who are interested in neuroscience, there is enormous amount of research that is happening on neuroscience in terms of how the brain is structured, what happens, how do we react, respond, how do we predict, and so on and so forth.
This is the first one which you mentioned, like micro and organizational.
Micro organizational macro.
How would you and where would you put COVID as an example there? Because
Global, macro.
the same thing also percolated right down to the micro.
Not to everyone. If you were impacted by COVID, you fell ill, it would be hugely micro for you. For many people who did not suffer any symptoms whatsoever, it was something that happened to maybe neighbors, happened to people around in our network. But no skin off my nose.
This is possibly one of the, I think, current examples which would have rubbed off on all the three areas.
It would.
The Because it has affected
Typically,
work.
typically if you look at the pyramid,
Yeah.
macro will somewhere or the other find implication for organization and micro, not vice versa. What is micro may not impact anyone outside you. We also spoke about our sense organs. Yes. Vision, which is almost 85% of our sensory input is vision. And I shared example of saying, while we say seeing is believing, our eyes, visionary system, brain, there are so many hard-coded stuff that we can actually not see what is in front of us. And if you go through many of these visual illusions, you will actually be amazed at how stupid your eye system is. But that's because your brain is now hard-coded some of it, which has come through evolution. For example, how many of you know that between our peripheral vision and our focused vision, there's a huge difference. My focused vision is the size of my thumb nail. My peripheral vision is everything else. I can see very clearly whatever is within that. I cannot see anything that is outside of that. For example, I can't see what is written on that board till I turn and say, okay, the right use of power is to empower others. If I am not seeing there, I will not be able to see it. But our peripheral vision is fantastic when it comes to changes. The slightest of light, shade, shadow change, and my peripheral vision will see. My focused vision may not. Why? Evolution. We had to survive, which means in the slightest of rustle in the bushes, and I had to become ready. And that is what drove a lot of those evolutionary changes. So we now try to define what is change management. Just give you 10 seconds to read this. Sorry? Any questions on this? It's an eclectic mix of various theories. But I'm listed engineering, business psychology, sociology, medicine. There are so many things that are sources of where change management, organizational change management is come. I've looked at theories, models, approaches from a variety of sources. You Google change management and you'll probably get this and more. So this is the framework that I'm going to use. Managing organizational change has various components, dimensions, call it whatever. Right? Starting from process, roles, resistance, commitment, synergy, culture, and communication. We'll not spend time on process because that's almost like project management in itself. So we will leave that out. We'll spend a lot of time on roles, resistance, communication. Not so much on culture, synergy, commitment, because they are also deep topics, large topics in themselves. We touch upon them and try not to go too much beyond. So let's go to roles. If you were in the last year's session, you would have seen this. And this also is a ramification of the fact that macro change to become effective or organizational change to become effective, you need to make change relevant for the micro level. So if you have an organizational change, you must change individual behaviors. And how do you change individual behavior? You have to define what's in it for me. WIIFM. This has been a point of a lot of debate in the past. Any questions, any contrasting, contrary opinions and views. I strongly believe this. Saying if you don't have something in it for yourself, you will not be party to the change. And that something could be a punishment or could be a reward, could be a prize. Either way, it has to be a pull or a push, but there has to be something. Right? And this is what therefore brings us to organizations. The problem is organizations are complicated. And therefore each change that you run in an organization, you need to be able to define actors in the change. And those actors are sponsors, change agents, targets, and advocates. Sponsors are the people who are ultimately accountable for the outcome of the change. They are the ones who feel the, so if you're talking of, like you mentioned, P&L, okay, if you're talking of P&L level changes, you're talking of the CEO, right? CEO becomes the sponsor. He is the person who has the authority to initiate or trigger that change. He is also the person who is going to write off the check at whatever cost that change brings. Targets are the ones who actually will change. So if you're talking of revenue increase, it's the sales marketing people primarily, though the whole organization has to rally, but the primary accountability is of sales and marketing. If it is cost reduction, it has to do with operations, with finance, with purchase, and so on and so forth. The people who actually decide and manage what needs to be done, how it needs to be done, who will monitor, timeline, etc., are the agents. This could be a change office. Right? It's very fashionable nowadays for companies which are doing big change to set up transformation office. They are all change agents. They are the ones who plan the implementation, who decide what will change, when will it change, who will try to change, which among those targets will do what.
KPIs will come under change agent. KPIs, KRIs will come under
They are
change.
outside of this. These are people.
Okay.
These are roles. KPIs are how you manage the change and how do you monitor progress, how do you figure out whether the change has worked or not. KPIs are outside of this. But yeah, change agents will probably have a list of KPIs that they are going to measure the target for. Shall we move ahead? Another complication in organizations are hierarchical structures. We spoke about sponsors, agents, and targets. So the sponsor tells the agent, get this IT system implemented. If the target reports to the agent, which is the linear structure, no problem. The agent will act like a sponsor and tell the target, tomorrow onwards you use this new system. But if life were so simple, chaos in organizations would never be possible. Right? Most organizations operate on the triangle or the square. So imagine the CEO, sponsor, telling the head of IT, the agent, to implement a new purchasing system. I don't know whether any of you have seen examples like this. In my consulting life, I have seen enormous number of systems. What do you think the head of purchase is telling the head of IT? I don't have time. कल आ जाओ, अगले हफ्ते मिलेंगे, और मैं conference पे जा रहा हूँ, etc. All kinds of excuses, but he will not respond to the agent.
Typical SAP implementation in the companies.
Enough of examples of that nature. IT is very common because most of us would have been involved somewhere or the other. But you can take IT, you can take organizational changes, you can take pay scale revisions, you can take even office timing changes. It's a change. Someone has to do it. So this is a conflict. How will it get resolved? The sponsor has to call both of them together and tell the purchasing guy, I want the new purchasing system here. IT will help you do it. Please report to me. If that is done, it will happen. If that is not done, it is then left to the social contract between the agent and the target as to whether it gets done or not. If they are friends, it will get done. If they are not friends, too bad.
By experience, S telling together EGLT. Many times we can detail first to start with what we are doing.
We'll come to it. I'm sorry.
Because then it becomes easy.
It's very easy, and we will talk
If
about.
you don't talk about why and
You are
purpose,
stealing my thunder, and we will talk about that.
then you create more problems.
The worst is when you have a head of IT talking to this IT programmer, and the head of purchase talking to a purchase manager. Okay? And the agent and the target, which is the programmer and the purchase manager, are supposed to work together and put the system in. Compared to this, that's a nightmare. It will work provided those S's talk to each other, provided they talk to the team together and make the requirement, like you just pointed out, the why, how, when, who, all that very clear.
That's fine, but there has to be again an S1 who
About
will
this.
make these two come
Talk
together.
to each other. Correct.
No, but I will say, in my experience, ERP implementation, they form a team of all the departments.
Correct.
And what you are saying that CEO should took the meeting and said, "See, very hell, you have to work together like this. I want this to be completed in 6 months."
Correct.
So all departments, even right from production to purchase, or even costing to accounts, everybody came together under one roof and they implemented. That is what.
So wherever it was successful, that happened. But for every success, I'm sure there are 2 or 3 failures where that would not have happened. And why did that not happen? Because the sponsor did not play his role properly. There is something here called consequence management. Okay? Do this or else. That only the sponsor has the authority to do. The purchasing guy can't tell the IT guy saying do this or else. He can only say do this or I'll complain. That's all he can do. Or the IT guy tell the purchase guy saying do this or else. He can only complain. So the consequence management is in the hands of the sponsor. The power and the pain is also in the hands of the sponsor. Resources, only the sponsor. Like you said, it was the CEO who directed all of them to come together. Could anyone else have done that?
We are talking about top-down approach.
Right.
Okay. Many times, like when I implemented ERP system, I never went into
Changes top-down only.
Never. I got to team people, told them what are the problems we are facing right now. Let's say customer service, or inventory going up and down, or flops. Now you discuss and come back to me, what are the best possible solutions?
So
Then ultimately,
you are
it
talking
ends up
about
in ERP.
2-3 things which are coming later, which is culture,
Sorry.
synergy, commitment.
Really?
Those are all elements.
I
which
say
give
it
rise
is
to
to
what
any
we did.
and to bring out a change successfully with minimum pain is bottom top approach than top bottom approach.
Change is always top to bottom, sir. It cannot be.
Then I have got it, what you are
Well,
saying. I am saying
no,
why.
The father has
You,
to change, then
you
the
got
children will
it,
change.
you are the top.
Yeah. Change is always top
So
bottom,
it
it's
is-
not bottom up.
It is always.
The father changes, the
either
children
a
change.
pyramid
Father doesn't change,
or a
children don't
linear.
change. As simple as
The
that.
only change that comes bottom up.
Father का drunkard
is
क्या करेगा?
A revolution.
It
No other
becomes very
change.
easy, it becomes very easy to implement.
It becomes very easy, and we will see some of those
Okay.
very aspects.
Like, once upon a time, voluntary retirement schemes, we are at, or like now, TCS going through, removing 20,000 guys. Now, it definitely will create a chaos or problem unless and until
It is managed well. Right? Let me share one example that I went through on my last day in a particular organization. Since I was party to the whole decision of letting people go, and we've been working on it for many months. You know what one of those guys who we left told us? We were 4 of us, the 4 senior people sitting, handing out those, asking them to say either resign or we'll give you a letter. That guy said, what took you so long? What took you so long to arrive at this decision? We've been talking about it, saying company not doing well, this, for months together. And finally we had to let people go. So the point is that if you're preparing well, then you don't have to tamp on toes. People will accept. So that was one example. The same, another person, in spite of knowing that this was coming, actually cried and he wanted to speak to his family, saying how life is. And anyway, those are other stories.
Just little line. Create a sponsor below 2 levels or 3 levels. How does that?
Not 2, 3 levels. It has to be your immediate report.
100
That
champions.
immediate reporting will have cascaded down from there. So it has to be a cascade in the organization. It can't be skip levels. If you have skip levels, and that typically also happens, something that I have not touched upon in this presentation, you create what are called black holes. Okay? I am the middle manager. My boss has spoken to my subordinate about some change. Okay? The subordinate doesn't deal with the boss every day. He deals with me every day. He will come and ask me, I will have no clue. What will I tell him? यार ये बॉस लोगों का यही चलता है, आप अपना काम करो, वो बाद में देखेंगे. What have I become? I become a black hole. There is a change message floating in the organization. I am absorbing all of it and nothing is going on. Because I have not been here. So anyway, good point. But maybe next time. So the idea is, if you can't sponsor, if you don't have the capacity, capability, mindset to sponsor a change, but intuitively you think that that change is going to be good, create another sponsor. Don't be a false sponsor. I hope there are no strict vegetarians. So, English breakfast, eggs and bacon, very common breakfast. Right? So the eggs are sponsored, the bacon is committed. And sponsorship actually demands that. You can't back off and you can't say I will contribute something, but beyond that don't ask me.
Don't put me in the front.
Don't put me in the front. But sponsoring a big change particularly does not operate like that. In a big change, bigger the change, more the sponsor will have to be down in the trenches. And he has to work along with it. Cardinal rule number 2, which I have seen very, very often, particularly with big, impactful changes, do not send a memo. Then you need to light a fire. You need to light a fire, you need to light a fire. You go, shout at them, scream at them, tear your head out, do whatever. But let the team recognize and understand the gravity of the situation. Otherwise, you'll say, oh, our profits are down 20%, and memo bajawe, half of the people will not read it. The other half will read it, but say, ye to घर में नहीं चलता है. If you want to light a fire, you have to light a fire. Some of your questions may be answered here. Sponsors don't operate well because they lose sight of some of these questions.
Communication is the key.
Yes. That's why the framework communication was something which was spread across the whole team.
Yeah, one slide before, when you light a fire, okay, but if the fire is uncontrolled, you have to have an extinguisher also, control it, not sort of.
The light of fire here is metaphorical. It is saying create the urgency. Create the
No, it is
urgency.
going to cause a big change, so what is the loss or profit, something
Create that
will be
urgency,
disruption
create that
for some
criticality,
time.
create that mindset which
Mindset,
recognizes
yeah, yeah.
that this is critical and needs to be
When I
done.
say fire, then there will be disruption for some time.
Light a fire doesn't necessarily light a fire.
No, I also don't say when I say extinguisher,
I understand.
it's having some control over the disruption. That is all.
Agree.
If I understand the statement, it means light the fire means you call a town hall and declare whatever you want to say, rather than
Town
sending a
hall,
mail.
small meeting, large meeting, whatever, that is dependent on the
Size of
organization's culture and the method of how communication takes place. But if I need just my team I need to call them and lay it on thick. Saying,
Take it off.
this is not acceptable. We can't report quarter after quarter loss. Either we shape up or the guys among you who are not shaping up, then shape up. Something like that.
Let's try to find acceptance with town hall is in the resort.
We will argue about it after this meeting. Change agents, what all do they need to do? Preparation, they are the ones who spend all their time in preparation, defining, clarifying the purpose, participating not themselves but also getting the sponsor and the target to participate, monitor the progress and persevere. Let me skip this. Just good managers, good team players, smart guys, ideas people, action people. We spoke about sponsoring. There can be wrong sponsors. For example, somewhere in the middle of the organization, someone is not committed to that change. In the cascade, he is expected to be a sponsor. Doesn't necessarily mean because you are in the chain, you have to be a good. So there are some signals of how wrong sponsors or how to spot incorrect or wrong sponsors. You may have seen this. This I have seen very often in general consulting also, not just IT. No time to pick the budget. He sponsored, he said, now you guys go ahead, keep me posted, keep me informed. But he will not have time. He reschedules review meetings again and again and again, which is basically a priority problem. Seeks that conditions, many times unrelated ones to be met before approval is granted. You want a small step, for example, you want a laptop to be given to the project team. We said, no, last time, that project team which was working on this, they took the laptop away. So you bring that laptop back and then you can take a new one. So you will have all these kinds of conditions. Time and attention security digs up ghosts from the past, similar to what I just said. Spends little time understanding the project but claims everyone said they understood. The sponsor himself has not spent any time and effort making sure that the understanding, like Mr. Vaidya pointed out, was in. He assumes or she assumes and goes ahead. What are do's and don'ts for the agent? Like the cardinal rules for the sponsor. Invest time and effort in obtaining a deep understanding of the change, the sponsor's mind and the target's mind. So the agent's role is pretty difficult, not an easy role. Do not usurp the role of the sponsor or the targets. Agents need to recognize that they are neither the sponsors nor the targets. So they have to be passionate about it but emotionally detached.
No, but they need to be catalysts.
They have to be catalysts, yes. But the catalyst,
So
for
the
example,
emotional detachment cannot be there.
the catalyst never gets consumed in a reaction. Right? Catalyst remains a catalyst, you can take it out and degrade eventually, but it doesn't get consumed in a reaction. That's the whole point of the catalyst. If it were getting consumed, it would be a reagent, not the catalyst. Okay? So agents are catalysts, but they have to be passionate about the change, but be able to take a very objective call with the sponsor or with the target. So we move on to the next, which is resistance. In my past, I have found this difficult to intuitively observe. We all believe that only negative change will have resistance. Okay? But here I am saying any change will have resistance. Okay, we come to
Yeah,
some
one thing, when we say agent, they need to be only,
inside.
there, inside.
No, no, it could be
Of
inside, it
company
could be
or the
consultants,
Ah,
could be
consultant
anyone,
also.
yeah. Could
Yeah,
be
that is
anyone
what-
who
Ah,
is
he
being
said you're a
provided
consultant
the
also.
role
Yeah,
to
consultant.
play that of the area,
Correct.
which is designing the
Consultant or
system,
leader.
developing the process, rules,
Both could be
policies.
outside
Could be
consultant
inside,
or
could be outside, yeah.
inside people, yeah.
Consultants, typically in the good old role defined, consultants are interim operators within the organization. They are not advisors standing outside. So it is the result of disruption in the pattern of expectation. Greater the disruption, greater the resistance. What I think to note is resistance is not necessarily a sign of enmity of the dislike here. It may be, but it is not necessarily so. Whereas in common parlance, the moment someone resists, if say, I propose a change, and I find someone is resisting that, my immediate conclusion will be this. So he has something against me, or he doesn't like me, or he is incompetent, depending on how generous my mood is for that.
That depends on the organization completely.
It depends on the organization. And we will speak about that as well. Politics, culture, it depends on all of this. So let's look at those
Yeah,
negatives.
red color sign.
Ohm.
Resistance.
Physics,
Resistance.
ohm is the symbol for resistance.
No, I am also electrical engineer, I thought it is the same thing. So it was exactly ohm.
Yes.
Resistance to the
Sorry.
flow of current.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Ohm is the.
yeah, ohm. So it's a very good thing you have got. Nice, right.
I spoke about negative and positive resistance. Negative resistance, we are all, I think, very familiar with. We must have seen this in one form or the other in our own experience. It goes from immobilization to denial to anger, bargaining, to depression, testing, acceptance. This is the full curve. So after acceptance, the change is in place. But you would also see, and this is emotional response, right? You will also see many people permanently stuck in one of the interim stages. Have you seen people for a short fuse? People who are stuck in anger. If you go and dig back into their experiences in the past, you will find that they were hit by some major change and they never managed to get beyond that anger stage, or bargaining, or denial, or immobilization. Immobilization in the medical sense is coma. You have people who live otherwise completely normal, but you will never get any emotional response from them. They are completely immune to any stimulus. They are in this stage. Positive resistance. Positive resistance happens when we initially embrace a change, thinking, wow, good. And then slowly we find that it is not so good. Right? So we move from uninformed optimism to informed pessimism. And I would invite you to go back to your lives. All of us have standard milestones in our life. Get into a good school, get into a good college, get a degree, get a job, get a house, get a wife, get kids. At every instant, think back if you can to what went through your mind at that point in time. I would like to believe at each of those instances, you will have some portions of self-doubt. I have done this, will I be able to manage? That is informed, and that is resistance. If you did not get support then, you actually would have checked out. Checked out like you check out from a hotel. You would privately check out, when you don't tell anybody, but within yourself, yes, given up. You publicly check out when you thump the table, slam the door, shout at the top of your voice, and walk out of a change. Both happen. But if you get supported through the mechanisms that we will talk about, education, understanding, detailed knowledge, etc., you will come to hopeful realism, saying maybe it will work. And then you will come to informed optimism. So there is positive resistance as well. This is less studied, but I believe this happens every time there is a positive change. Initially the change you accept, and then you say, oh, yeah, yeah. For example, the income tax change that you spoke about, initially there was lots of positive, and slowly people started saying, oh, but I have to give up this deduction, this reimbursement I will have to now lose, etc., etc. And then you start saying, what? I will do a lot more work. If they manage to do the work, they will have
Or post-COVID work from home.
post-COVID work from home.
No.
No, in my case, I'm a coach, right? Pre-COVID, it was unthinkable not to do in-person meetings. My coaching meetings would all be in person. I have flown from here to Delhi to here to Hyderabad, here to Madras, Chennai, just to hold 2 hours VR meetings. And I would have lost the whole day. Prior to COVID, that was norm. You said you have a client outstation, full day gone. Post-COVID, with some degree of reluctance, I picked up coaching online. Nowadays, I don't forget traveling, I don't commute. I stay locked in Thane and I do all my meetings from there. Everything is online. Start from selling a project to billing, collecting, closing, everything is done online. So you're right. We learn to figure out how to manage, and that's part of building resilience.
This parabola you have created
Ah,
and the exit points,
checkout points.
essentially indicates that on the left hand side of that is because of non-communication or lack of communication. And the right side is perhaps communication playing the role.
May not be communication, it will be just self-exploration. It will be self-analysis.
No, the informed optimism is some element of communication.
Not necessarily. I just start analyzing. I got married. Now I have a wife to take care of. Both have a job. Who will take care of the house? Who will take care of her parents, my parents? Do we have enough to take care of monthly expenses, etc.? All those are my own creations. No one came and told me that.
There is a data involved.
There is data involved. Oh yes. There is data
You
involved.
could call it internal communication.
Yeah, sure.
Communication happens, but with it.
The problem with resistance is there is no standard way to manufacture itself. It could appear or it may remain hidden and you will never know. So it can be overt or covert, that is, it could be explicit or implicit. It could be immediate or deferred. If in an organizational context I am implementing a change, it's not necessary that people who are opposing that change will come and tell me right away. You may keep watching and waiting. कि इसको बताएंगे क्यों? It's easy to deal with when it's overt and immediate because you are in the context and it is visible. Very difficult if it becomes covert or deferred. Organizationally, resistance is typically manifested in logistic, economic, or political reasons. Right? What is logistical reasons? No, we don't have capacity, we don't have enough manpower, or we don't have enough lines, we don't have machines, etc., etc. These are logistical reasons. Economic reasons, we don't have money. Very straight, very simple. Political reasons is, I am completely for this change, the union will never agree. These are typically, you will see reasons for resisting change in any organization. But remember, this could be a small scale. Could be a small scale.
I'm just asking to use the temperature.
Too cold. Too cold, yes.
So let me share a secret with you. Professional speakers, particularly after lunch, they will get the AC turned down to the lowest. You know why? When it is warm, it's very tempting to go to sleep. When it is cold, you can't sleep. We all believe that we like to have etc. etc.
Secrets.
But the fact remains that psychologically and physiologically, if it is cold, you can't sleep. And if you are a professional speaker, you don't want audience to go to sleep. Now, this could be a smoke screen, right? What is underlying that smoke screen could be resistance at the individual level. Here's a small list, I have a longer list elsewhere. I know that this change won't work. No in quotes. So I resist. Or it could be economics, where maybe my salary will be cut. Maybe I will lose some incentive. Maybe whatever, some suspicion. It could change my habit or behavior. Or it could demand a change in my habit or behavior.
I'm used to this.
I'm used to something I don't want to change. Emotional security values that we speed up. Misunderstanding, ignorance, lack of skills, fear of failure, threat to jobs. Emotional side effects of ego. No one can certainly ask me. This is a very common resistance driver. If I have not been involved in some design of a change, I will feel emotionally anti that change, and therefore I will resist.
That was the reason what I was talking about. Instead of top to bottom, any change bottom to top is very easy to implement and it is less resistance.
I agree with you to the extent that when it is small changes,
Even big changes, removing the people from the organization, 30% of the people under VRS.
it would have come from bottom up,
Bottom, yes.
saying the idea for VRS came from
Why
bottom.
we are talking about why we need to put VRS?
So that is, in my normal curve, that is one of the extremes as an organization.
Shutting down the plant, I'm telling you. Shutting down the plant by the union leader himself. Forget about the management.
Great. That's a great example of one of the extremes that works.
It was very, takes time, but becomes painless.
Good. Any reactions?
True.
How do you deal with resistance? A variety of education, communication, participation and involvement, what you just mentioned. Facilitation support, negotiation, and also explicit and implicit coercion. It used to happen a lot in yesteryears, particularly in the factories, etc.
No, even in our company, when the substation, we had to do the unmanning or remote from SCADA system. That time we had to bring the people, we had to give them initially some overtime or something. And then they slowly adapted to that. And that is how we could make that.
What's in it for me?
What's in it? Yeah, they got the initiative, right? And
Now
then
the-
it became very strong also for some time. But then somebody had to then get it broken.
Now the peculiar part of managing resistance is, resistance can be managed, we spoke about some of those elements. Whichever way you manage, you can either manage it as an upfront payment in quote unquote, meaning you're investing everything upfront, or you can do it post change implementation on an ongoing manner. So if it is upfront, you are communicating, you are training, you are reinforcing, etc., which is before the change has been put in completely. This is like buying a house with upfront payment. Contrast this with an EMI based payment, where you will have to monitor, you will have to keep policing, you have to keep ensuring compliance, reporting to all. And you can still do that. So you can manage those resistance in either which way. Which choice depends on what the change is. If it's a small trivial change, it may be neutral as to which one you use. But if it's a deep cultural change impacting the whole organization, advisable to take the fund, do it upfront. But it's never, it's always a basket, it's more what is predominant. I will rush through commitments, energy, culture. key item here to recognize and change is compliance is not equal to commitment. Compliance is fear of some penalty or punishment. So you will comply. Come again? Compliance is not equal to
Fear.
the fear of some punishment, penalty, etc. may ensure compliance. But the moment that fear goes away, compliance goes away. So if you want to build long-term change, you have to build commitment. And commitment is a slow process. Organizational commitment has to devolve into individual commitment, which goes through various stages: awareness, knowledge, pride, acceptance, comprehension, mastery, integration. So typically, like muscle memory, you move from unconscious incompetence to conscious incompetence to conscious competence to unconscious competence. So when you are consciously competent, it is muscle memory.
That journey updates of the results from time to time may be a necessity.
Yeah, they are necessary. So that is what we will talk about in communication. I will skip this. Just says that look, it's not necessary that every time you start off on the path of commitment, you will end up being committed. You could drop off in between. And these are the various stages. You may be unaware, confused, negative perception, decisions not to support, etc. Okay. Synergy. If you are in an organization and you are not using exploiting synergy, then you are not an organization. Synergy is the soul of change in an organization. Simple, 1 + 1 is greater than 2. The problem with synergy and organization, we spoke about this earlier, that hides certain things, which is, it's not a single pyramid, there are so many sub-pyramids within the organization. The functional sub-pyramid, purchase department, finance department, manufacturing, etc., etc. Or there could be political groups. Offices in Murli, all guys staying in Thane become a political group. So if the company says that tomorrow onwards we are going to introduce a bus up to Mulund and not to Thane, there is burning chaos. Because all the Thane guys will gang up. They may be from different departments, like purchase, say, IT, say, manufacturing, but they are all from Thane, so they will gang up. So that's a political group. So if you are implementing change in an organization, you have to keep in mind those functional and the political alignments within the organization. What you need to do is to create the virtuous cycle of cooperative conflict and try to get away from conflictive conflict. Cooperative conflict starts with a win-win arrangement. Discuss and create a win-win situation. And then it goes through that cycle. Culture, huge subject, so I will not spend too much time on it. I've used Edgar Scheinen's definition of culture, and he says there are 3 principal elements that define culture: visible artifacts, espoused values, underlying assumptions. Visible artifacts could be how our office is designed, color scheme they use, do we have paintings all over, or is it a very functional office? Those are all cultural symbols. Then there is the whole concept of values. What values does this organization espouse, follow, promote? And then underlying assumptions, which are the shared beliefs. What works, what is success, what is failure. The reason why culture is important is, in an organizational context, culture is a huge, huge force to maintain status quo. It is so easy for people to say, हम यहाँ ऐसे ही करते हैं, and that is culture. Or this won't work here, not invented here. These are all cultural elements. Okay? So if you are implementing change and there is a strong culture and your change is going to go contrary to that culture, rest assured that it is more likely to fail than succeed. Sorry? It will create a lot of resistance. There will be a lot of negative force. So if you have change which is running counter to your culture, very low probability of success. If you have change which runs aligned with your culture, fairly high probability of success. Somewhere in between will be moderate. So how do you manage to bring big changes? I'm just taking an example like this. It could be the current culture in one direction and the desired culture could be in the reverse direction. Okay, but the principle remains the same. Any thoughts? So I had a colleague in our UK office, John Owens. He would always say, rhetorically, can you eat an elephant? And then he would answer saying, yes you can, one bite at a time. So you need to break a large change up into smaller pieces. Which is why they say a large change typically takes time, because it is no longer one change. There is multiple series of changes oriented in a particular direction that you want to do. So you can do big changes, but you have to do them slowly, you have to do them piece by piece, keeping in mind the longer objective, the larger objective. Which brings me to communication. Like we just pointed out, communication has to be the background music during organization. There is no stage in organizational change where you can afford not to have communication. In an organization, it happens everywhere in families, societies, etc. In the absence of communication, it creates information vacuum. And what happens in a vacuum? The slightest of leakage, stuff rushes in. If you have information vacuum, it can't sustain, information will flow in. You will not have control over what information is flowing. And that is where all rumors, negative, all those thoughts start coming in. Because you have allowed a vacuum to be created in the organization process. We have a concept called tappers and listeners. Any of you aware of that? Have you ever come across this concept? So try it out at home. This is an actual experiment conducted by a psychologist in Harvard or Stanford. So the class was divided into two groups. One were called tappers, one were called listeners. A list of 25 odd songs, very popular songs, Happy Birthday to You, Jingle Bell, etc. were shared. Shared openly, everyone knew what those songs were. Each tapper was called up and asked to tap out a song that they selected without declaring to everyone else as to what song. So I come here, I look at the list, I choose a song in my head and I tap it out. Before that exercise is carried out, there was a poll taken in the class saying how many of songs will get guessed correctly. What's your guess?
It depends upon audience. If it's from India, we can say, like, we can.
Take your assumptions, whatever be your audience. Forget Jingle Bell, etc. India mein, Saare Jahan Se Acha, Vande Mataram, etc. Those are the songs. Now decide.
70 to 80%.
Will be guessed correctly. Or will not guess correctly.
Will guess correctly.
Will guess correctly. Any other points? So you're not far away from their guess. They guess 50. What do you think the actual was? 4. Try it out at home. Take a song in your head. Tell your family that these are the list of 10 songs, 12 songs, whatever. I'm going to tap out one of them. Let me tap, if you don't waste time. You will realize how difficult it is to figure out the song from the tapping paper somewhere else. It's almost impossible. 4% is random. 25 songs would be 4%. Why do you tap out a song? We will try and guess. So anyone who's good at songs?
Then what do you mean by tap is making tap no? I said
Oh,
this is tapping. It's very difficult to because there is
No way.
sound. Sound only is there.
Sound is there. You don't know what the tune is.
Words are not there.
More importantly, I am playing the song in my head when I am tapping. So I know the
You
tune.
know the tune.
And it is impossible for me to pretend that I don't know the tune. I have tried it out.
Only 4%.
why tapping, even whistling?
Even whistling, if you are not a good whistler, you will never be able to convey the song. Which is why you need an orchestra to play a good song. Single instruments find it very difficult, particularly percussion instruments. You can do it with the violin, you can probably do it with some of these wind instruments. Percussion is very difficult. So tappers and listeners, the sponsor has the plan, the concept, the vision, the pain points, the remedies, all very clear in his head. And when he communicates, he is communicating as if the rest of them have the same degree of knowledge. Big assumption and a wrong assumption. Particularly because from the sponsor's position as the head of the department, head of the organization, CEO, he has access to multiple times the information that is accessible to someone else. And that is the problem. So the tappers and listeners is a genuine problem in communication. You have to be over communicating. Explain to the extent that you can. You explain, then you ask them to feed back to you, saying, what did you understand? Then you will know actually what they understand.
Actually, this tapper technology used in railway also to signaling. They have some machine they just tap it.
Oh, that is similar to Morse code.
Telegraph, yeah.
That's a different, it is tapping technology.
The big
Concept is the same.
Okay. Some of the real world breakdowns in the communication that I have come across and seen myself. And this is something that is shared in the internet as well. Many people have seen this. A manager sends a detailed memo ahead of a decision-making meeting. No one reads it. Okay, you come into the meeting and you find that no one has read it. You're going back to square one to start. Because the rules of engagement have not been set in place. How we will communicate has not been agreed. What we will communicate has not been agreed. How do you expect a response has not been agreed. And that is why there are etiquettes for communication. Colleague, this is an urgent Zoom call because message was sent on Slack. My problem also. I wasn't using Slack. I use WhatsApp. Occasionally. I'm not fixed on WhatsApp. So there have been occasional people have said, yeah, WhatsApp message, you have not responded. I look at WhatsApp twice a day, thrice a day. I'm not stuck to WhatsApp. I have actually turned down my notification because I don't want to get disturbed. So if you send it on WhatsApp, sorry, my mistake. CEO is approval of a 6-page memo because there was no summary. Because I don't want to read as a CEO 6 pages and then arrive at my conclusion. I want a ready-made pre-digested stuff. Leader preparing for board meeting. This is very, very common. Preparing for a board meeting receives 5 inconsistent reports in 5 different positions. We actually had in consulting, we used to have one version of truth. I don't know if you come across this phrase. One version of truth. The organization should have one version of truth. You can't have sales giving one figure, production giving one figure, marketing giving one figure, finance giving a fourth figure. You need one version of truth. And this is that problem. This happens very, very common. Right? We assume, the CEOs assume that that's a photocopying machine. He has assumed that the, whatever, the office guy, the young man, understands that the CEO recognizes this as a photocopying machine. This young man assumes that the CEO wants it shredded. And
Everything is assumption.
there are so many assumptions that we make. So if your communication is not good, we will make these assumptions because there is vacuum in the overall communication. Question for you. Which is the most impactful communication tool in an organization? Today. Why today?
Most impactful communication tool.
Yeah. Tool, method, approach, whatever, call it the whatever name.
Personal call.
Personal call.
Email.
Email.
Ground level means, you go near to the people.
One on one.
One
In
and
person.
one and
In person.
Or by functional,
Pardon?
department wise.
Department, whatever, cascaded, etc. If the boss does not behave in alignment with the requirements of the change, communication has failed. The boss can say, oh, cost cutting, but he goes business class, executive class, whatever, stays in the 7 stars of the world. No change is going to take. You will not achieve cost cutting. So, and we spoke about this when we spoke about the sponsor's role, private role and a public role. So if his private role is different from a public role is saying cost reduction, private role is having fun, it will not work. So the most important, this, good or bad, is true not just in organization, it is true in society and in our family.
For example, education was an example of that.
Lot of that. I don't know how many of you have young kids at home or remember your young kids. Have you ever tried to tell your son or daughter when they were really young, 4 years, 5 years old, saying, Coke nahi pina, but you are drinking Coke? Do you think they ever agree to you or listen to you or obey you? Very unlikely.
That's why it said parents are the role model of a kid.
Parents are a huge role model. Parents, teachers, and generally people who kids think their parents respect or are fearful of. Police, not your kid always a police pulling, that kid will always be fearful of police. And that's all role model behavior getting translated. So coming back to your question, communication, all the things that you need to communicate. Before change, during change, after change. So underlining again saying communication has to be the background music in your change. At every point in time there is something to feedback. Pardon? Performance feedback. Do this. What is your role? Then during is monitoring and performance feedback. How are we doing? What more do we need to do? How are you doing? After change, what's the price? What have we achieved? And how do we cement these changes? But is it so simple? End of the day, what is communication? In the simplest of terms. Communication is thoughts from my head becoming thoughts in your head. Right? If it is gone without any change, it is kudos to a lot of things.
In a simple room, in this room, you give one message in the ears and then it comes, you will find a totally different message coming out.
Yeah, hugely changed. I have some videos on that. Maybe some other day we will share that as well. As to what happens, how it gets mutated, completely destroyed from the original meaning. So there is noise, right? When I'm thinking, I could also be thinking other things. similarly, when I translate that, something which is very visionary in my mind could become very pedestrian when I deliver it to you, if I don't have control over language. Then there is this room, right? We speak, act, and doing this, but it's too cold, too dark, some noise outside, some distraction. There's a lot of noise element. So in that noise, quality and quantity of the communication will get missed, and so on. And the reverse is true when we read. So when we as an audience absorb it, we are impacted by the messaging because of our own experience, our past, our understanding of the language, etc. So for a sponsor and agent, when they communicate, they have to be very clear in communicating, and it has to go back and forth, back and forth. You cannot under-communicate, or you cannot afford to under-communicate, and you cannot over-communicate. There is no concept of over-communication. The more you communicate, the better it is, from a change perspective.
Right now, this social media is a big noise.
It is not.
Social
It is not.
media, so much WhatsApp,
Right,
there,
correct.
so many.
And it's distraction, right?
Distraction also.
Every time you start doing something and you get distracted, you will go in a completely different direction.
Roto is working on it. Roto is working on it.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, some final thoughts. Now, myths and realities. People in the organization act first in the best interest of the organization, want to understand the what and why of the organization change, engage in change because of the merits of the change, and opt to be architects or participate well constructively of the change effectively. These are all these are myths. Not to say that it doesn't happen, like Mr. Vaidya's point, there will be those exceptional organizations where these may be realities, but by and large, in most cases, these are myths. What are the realities? Realities are people act first in their own self-interest. Don't want to genuinely understand the, bata do yaar, kar lenge hum. Don't explain why this has been done, how this is going. I don't have the patience to listen to it, because then I have to spend time and energy in doing it. Engage in organization change because of their own pain, not because of preference. Expect to be viewed as having good intentions, even though they view with suspicion the intentions of those initiating the change. Boss has some ulterior motive. I am perfectly for the opposite. Ought to be victims of the change rather than architects. Some more. Organizations are rationally functioning systems. Everything that happens in an organization happens logically, well thought out, etc. Are wired to assimilate systemic change, meaning you bring some good systemic change, the organization adopt and implement it. Operate from a value-driven orientation, meaning everything has to do with increasing organizational value. Can affect long-term systemic change even with short-term leadership. You have a CEO only for 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, but he will still implement long-term change and can achieve systemic change without creating conflict in the system. All these are myths. The reality is the converse. And it's different. This is important. People and organizations
Root cause.
people and organizations deny that the preceding 10 realities are in fact their own realities. You go and check these out with any organization, they will say, ऐसा ही होता है हमारे में. All those myths, हमारे organization में it works. And we do have the capacity, develop the resilience in the face of these realities. Okay? Last 3-4 slides. In a nutshell, for change to be successful, you need pain with status quo. Pain sufficient for you to be pushed off that status quo. You should have a good vision of what the remedied situation is going to be like. And then you also need a remedy which will take you from here to there. any of these elements is missing, you are in trouble. For example, what if you had no vision? You had a pain and a remedy, but you don't know where you want to get to. What would happen?
Visualization is important.
Visualization is important. If you didn't have a vision, you would just lose steam. You would start well, but then you don't know where you're going. For example, if you had no remedy, you had pain and you had a fancy idea of where you want to go, what would you get? Crudely put, you get ulcers.
More
You will
pain.
have a lot of stress because of the pain.
More pain.
You would have a lot of frustration that you can see the
Yes.
future, but you have no way of getting it. Except, so you will not get, but this is critical. So you have to have a pain, remedy, and a vision. Most change projects are like tripods or three-legged stools. For those who are physics inclined, a three-legged stool will be stable within limits, meaning the legs don't have to be equal to each other. They can be off in size. The stool will manage to sit stably for certain limits within those limits. But if any leg goes beyond that limit, then the stool will topple. So the three legs, not just for change projects, for any project, are equal to objective, time, and resources. So if you set one of them, you can then have a choice of a large elbow room for the second, but probably have no choice in it. So if you fix two of them, there is only limited choice available on the third element. So if you have fixed an objective and time, for example, saying over the next 3 years this is what I will achieve, then your resources are almost predetermined. And you can play around with this combination. Something that I am very personally convinced of, whether it be related to building commitment, handling resistance, communication, etc. There are 5 key elements within this combo. And let me explain these to you. Explain is the rational, logical reasoning behind change. Excite is when you appeal to sentiments and emotion. Okay, this will make us very happy, this will be great, or the converse will make us very sad, etc. Enlist is when it's a matter of faith. You get people sign on because of faith. So if there is a celebrity CEO, he says we will do this, people will sign up because they have faith in him, not because they understand or they're emotionally attached, whatever. They say boss ne bola hai, he's always delivered whatever he said, so we are after him. We will back. Enable is when the necessary tools, knowledge, understanding is missing. So you have to provide those. Enjoin is an old English word, usually used in the context of the court. Yeah. But we should have started. Yeah. But we should have started at.
The lights, if you want, you can put on the lights.
We should have started at 5:30. Unfortunately, we started closer to 6. So, and seek your indulgence. Any questions?
No questions?
I think the questions were all there during the session
Yeah.
itself. It was very interactive, very, very interactive.
PowerPoint presentation is, you
Yeah.
need to go.
Revisit some of the.
I will share this PowerPoint presentation. I will
Yeah.
put it on to.
But that will be very useful.
Useful.